Women all over the place are waking up to a cold reality where the men they spent years pushing away have actually listened and walked out of their lives, leaving them in serious financial trouble. This whole situation is the direct result of choices made over decades, and it is hitting harder every single day. Stick with me all the way through this because by the end, you're going to see exactly why men have chosen this path and what it means for everyone going forward in a way that might just open your eyes for good. If you're enjoying these Angry Guy videos, you can show your support by buying me a Red Bull with a one-time gift or via a monthly pledge by using the link in the description of the video. You know, when you sit down with your buddies at the bar and the conversation turns to how things have changed in the dating world and in society, you start to hear the same stories over and over again. Men are not showing up the way they used to. They are not approaching women in the same numbers. They are not investing their time, their energy, or their money into relationships or even casual dates like they once did. And the reason is simple. Men have had enough. After years of being told they were toxic for being men, after being painted as dangerous just for existing, after movements that encourage women to view them as the enemy, men decided to take a step back and focus on themselves. They found peace and solitude. They built their own lives. They kept their resources for their own benefit, and they stopped playing the game that was rigged against them. Now, women are left scrambling because they never expected this outcome. They thought men would always come crawling back because of biology or need or whatever excuse they had in their heads. But men prioritize their own survival and their own peace. And that has left a massive gap in the support system that so many women relied on without even realizing it. Think about it this way. For a long time, women were sold the idea that they could have it all without compromise. Feminism promised independence and power, and the state was supposed to be there as the ultimate provider through welfare programs and social safety nets. Women told men to back off, to not approach them, to respect their space and their autonomy. They participated in campaigns that shamed men broadly, like Me Too, and believe all women and radical ideas that called for the end of men, or at least their diminished role in society. They shamed men for not being emotional enough and then shamed them when they showed emotion. They punished men for simply being part of the world. And men listened. They walked away quietly without big announcements or arguments because they realized that arguing with women often leads nowhere. You cannot reason with feelings when facts do not matter in the conversation. Men would walk away from those interactions feeling drained while women felt energized and validated. So instead of continuing that cycle, men chose silence and distance. They chose to keep their money, their time, and their attention for themselves. This walking away has become so widespread that it is affecting every part of life. Go to single events or mixers and you hear the reports. 1,000 women might show up, but only a handful of men, or sometimes none at all. Women are posting online about how no one approaches them anymore, how the dating scene is dead, how they cannot get a man to even take them out for a meal. And for many of them, that meal is not just a date, it is literally how they eat for the day. Without men providing that free food or covering expenses, many women are struggling to afford basic necessities. Rent is high, food costs have gone through the roof, and their own incomes are not keeping up, especially in expensive cities like New York, where young women are living paycheck to paycheck despite working full time. They have made choices in spending and lifestyle that left them vulnerable. And now, with men opting out, they are feeling the full weight of that vulnerability. Single mothers are in an even tougher spot. Without the financial and emotional support from men, they are finding it nearly impossible to feed their kids and keep a stable home. The state that they counted on is broke itself and cannot provide the level of support that was promised. The gravy train that feminism and modern society sold them is coming to an end. We are heading into economic conditions that could make the Great Depression look mild by comparison. Inflation, debt, and high living costs are squeezing everyone, but women who burn their bridges with men and traditional support structures are going to feel it the hardest. They have no husbands, no boyfriends, no male friends stepping up, no family networks, and no community to fall back on because they traded all that for the illusion of doing it alone. The desperation is showing up everywhere. Women are lashing out in anger at men for abandoning them. They call it betrayal. But the truth is, men simply stopped engaging with a system that offered them nothing but risk and drain. Men got tired of being used as walking wallets and emotional support without any real reciprocity. Female friendships for men were often one sided, where they gave attention and help and received little in return. In dating, women wanted all the benefits of a boyfriend without providing the benefits of a girlfriend. They believed men would always pursue them because men wanted sex or children. But men have woken up to the fact that their own survival and peace are more important than chasing temporary pleasures that come with heavy costs. They are done with the gaslighting, the lies, and the constant demands. They have silently walked away and they are not looking back. Look at the stories coming out. Women in their cars living as homeless because they cannot afford rent. Women begging online for help with basic bills. Women admitting they cannot survive without male provision in one form or another. And instead of reflecting on their own choices, many are doubling down on the anger toward men. But men are not falling for the guilt trips anymore. They have seen through it. They know that protecting women from the consequences of their actions only delays the inevitable and makes the crash harder later. This time, women are going to face reality head on without the buffer that men have traditionally provided. It is a harsh truth, but it is the truth, and it is time everyone faced it squarely. And this is not just about money, it is about the entire dynamic that has shifted. Men are refusing to approach because they see the risks and the lack of value in the effort. In 2026 and beyond, this trend is only growing. Women are stunned because they expected the attention to always be there. They thought their value was permanent, but life has a way of showing the truth when the support systems collapse. The broke woman epidemic is real and it is spreading. Women who once lived high on the hog with expectations of men paying for everything are now facing the music. They ask for money for nails or rent or dates early on, and men are shutting that down immediately. Genuine interest does not come with a handout request attached. Men are hiding their wallets and focusing on building their own security. Let me share a way to think about this that makes it hit home. Picture a woman who spent her early years rejecting solid men because they did not meet some fantasy standard pushed by social media and culture. She chased excitement and independence. She accumulated debt and made lifestyle choices that felt freeing at the time. Now, in her later years, she looks around, and the men who are stable and successful are no longer interested in investing in her. The younger men are figuring out the game earlier and opting out too. As she posts videos about her struggles, hoping for sympathy or solutions, but the sympathy from men has dried up. This is the table turning that was inevitable. Women had their leverage in youth and they used it poorly. Now men have the leverage of time and resources and they are using it to protect themselves. The panic is setting in across social media. Women are discussing openly how they cannot afford life without male support. They are angry and confused because they believed the narrative that men would always need them more. But men have chosen peace. They have chosen self respect. They have chosen a life where their hard earned money stays with them to build something real rather than being poured into bottomless pits of expectation. This is the sobering wake up call for our time. Winter has arrived for the ideas that promised women the world without cost. And as the economic pressures mount, the desperation will only grow. Men are not coming back to rescue the situation this time. They are done being the buffer between women and the real world. And as we continue to unpack this, you start to see the patterns repeat in story after story. Take the woman living in a big city chasing the dream but barely making it. She works her hours, but the bills pile up. The car payment, the rent, the credit cards all become too much. Instead of cutting back or changing her approach, she looks to men to fill the gaps. But those men have heard it all before. They know the game. They see the same tactics from different women and they walk away from it. This epidemic of broke women asking for financial help early in interactions is turning men off completely. It shows a lack of self responsibility and a sense of entitlement that men are no longer willing to entertain. Friends, this is raw, but it needs to be said. Nature designed women to thrive with the protection and provision of men, their families, and their communities. When that system is rejected, the results are predictable. The state cannot replace the role of committed men and strong social bonds. The promises have failed, and now the bill is due. Women who thought they were liberated are finding themselves more dependent than ever, but with fewer people willing to provide that dependence. The screams of abandonment are loud, but they fall on deaf ears because men have chosen their own path and they are sticking to it. This is the new normal, and it is only going to become more pronounced as time goes on. We can see it in the way single events play out. The imbalance is obvious. Women show up in droves, hoping to meet someone who can help stabilize their situation. Men are absent or few and far between because they have found better ways to spend their time and money. They are building businesses, hitting the gym, pursuing hobbies, traveling, or simply enjoying quiet evenings without drama. The peace they have found in walking away is something they are not eager to give up for the uncertainty of modern relationships. Women, on the other hand, are left wondering where all the good men went. The answer is they went where they are valued and respected, and that is no longer in the dating market as it stands. This situation calls for a real reckoning. It is not about hatred or revenge, it is about truth and consequences. Men have simply stopped participating in a system that punishes them for their participation. They have opted for self preservation, and that choice has ripple effects across society. Women are now facing the harshness of life without the traditional safeguards. Food security, housing stability, emotional support, all of it is harder without men in the picture. And the state is in no position to step in fully. We are looking at a future where these realities become even starker, and the choices of the past come back to haunt an entire generation. I want you to really think about your own experiences or the experiences of the people around you. How many guys do you know who have pulled back from dating? How many have told you they are happier focusing on themselves? How many have stories of women expecting them to pay for everything while offering minimal effort in return? Those stories are common because the dynamic has shifted. Men are informed now. They know when they are being used for a free meal or for attention without commitment. They see the one sided nature of many interactions and they choose not to engage. This awareness has spread like wildfire and it has changed the landscape completely. As economic conditions worsen, the pressure on women increases. Jobs are not as secure, costs are rising, and savings are harder to build, especially with previous poor decisions. The women who embrace the independent lifestyle fully are discovering its limits the hard way. They have no fallback, and the panic is real. Lashing out at men becomes the default response because accepting responsibility is too painful. But that lashing out only pushes men further away, reinforcing the cycle. Men are not engaging in arguments or debates because they know the outcome. They know that facts do not always win against strong emotions, and so they conserve their energy for what matters to them. This is the authoritative truth of our time. Men walking away is not a phase, it is a rational response to years of disrespect and imbalance. Women are feeling the consequences, and society as a whole is adjusting to this new reality. The future will belong to those who adapt and those who built their own strength rather than relying on others to carry them. For women, that adaptation may come too late for some, but the lessons will be learned one way or another. For men, it is a time of empowerment and focus on self. The bar is where we talk about these things openly and honestly, and that is what we are doing here. Now, picture another layer to this because the stories keep coming in the same way from all corners of the country and from women in different age groups and backgrounds, but the pattern stays consistent every time. A woman in her 30s posts a video explaining how she cannot figure out why no men are approaching her anymore, and she lists all the things she brings to the table. But the truth underneath is that she spent her 20s rejecting good men and building a life that depended on male resources without ever acknowledging it. She went through the movements that told her men were the problem, and she bought into the idea that the government or society would always step in to cover the gaps. Now, the gaps are too wide, and the support is gone, and the panic sets in because the rent is due, and the fridge is empty, and there is no one left to call for help. Men see these videos and they recognize the pattern immediately because they have lived it themselves or watched their friends live it, and they know better than to step back into that role. They remember the times they were called toxic for setting boundaries or labeled dangerous for simply speaking facts. And they remember how those interactions always ended with them feeling exhausted while the woman walked away feeling justified. That cycle is broken now, and men are not restarting it. Consider the single mother trying to raise kids on her own after believing the narrative that she did not need a man in the picture. She thought the state programs would cover childcare and food and housing, but those programs are stretched thin and the funding is drying up because the state itself is dealing with massive debt and economic strain. The kids need clothes and school supplies and consistent meals, and the mother is working two jobs just to stay afloat, but the numbers do not add up without that extra support that men used to provide through relationships or even casual help. She lashes out online, calling men selfish for not stepping up. But the men watching those posts remember how they were treated in past relationships where they were expected to be the provider without any real partnership or respect in return. They remember the gaslighting and the demands and the way facts were dismissed in favor of feelings, and they choose to keep their resources for their own families or for themselves. This is not abandonment. It is self preservation after years of one sided arrangements. And the economic squeeze is real and it is getting tighter every month. Food prices keep climbing. Rent in major cities like New York is out of control, and wages are not keeping pace for most people, but especially for women who made career and lifestyle choices based on the promise of endless support. They bought into the idea that they could live independently and still have men lining up to cover the extras. But now, those men are nowhere to be found because they have seen the writing on the wall. Men are focusing on their careers, their health, their investments, and their peace of mind. They are not wasting money on dates that lead nowhere or on women who view them as walking ATMs. The free meal game is over, and women who relied on it for daily survival are feeling the difference in their bank accounts and in their daily lives. Homelessness among women is rising, and living in cars is becoming a common story because there is no safety net left after the bridges to men and families were burned in the name of independence. Think back to how this all started building years ago. The movements targeted men broadly and painted them as the source of every problem. Women were encouraged to view every man as a potential threat and to demand space and autonomy at all costs. They shamed boys for being boys and told men to cry more, only to mock them when they did. They pushed policies and cultural shifts that removed men from the equation in families and communities and replaced them with government promises that never delivered in the long run. Men watched this happen and they quietly decided enough was enough. They stopped approaching, stopped debating, stopped negotiating because they realized those conversations never went anywhere productive. Arguing with feelings instead of facts always left them drained. and the women empowered. So they chose the smarter path of withdrawal. Now the results are clear in the empty seats at single events and in the desperate posts online. Women are realizing too late that they were not designed to go it alone in the way modern society promised. Nature set things up so that women thrived with the protection of husbands and male networks and strong communities. When that support was rejected, the vulnerability became exposed. The state cannot fill that role no matter how much it promises because the state is broke and the systems are overwhelmed. We are looking at conditions that could dwarf the Great Depression in scale because the social fabric is thinner now and the safety nets that existed even then are gone. Women have no husbands, no boyfriends, no male friends, no fathers, no extended families, and no communities to turn to, and that leaves them truly up against the wall. The screams of betrayal are getting louder, but men are not listening because they have moved on to their own lives and their own priorities. They are not stepping in to shield women from reality anymore because doing so only postponed the inevitable crash. This shift is visible in every corner of social media and in real world observations. Women post about their financial struggles and their loneliness and their confusion over why men have disappeared from the dating scene. They blame men for the situation, but the truth is the situation was created by decades of choices that prioritized short term independence over long term stability. Men have become informed about the tactics, and they recognize when a woman is looking for a free meal or attention without offering anything real in return. Female friendships often turned out to be one sided drains on time and energy, and dating became the same thing with women wanting boyfriend benefits without girlfriend benefits. Men saw through it and walked away to protect their own survival. They would rather keep their money in their own pockets than risk it on someone who might turn around and treat them as disposable once the resources stop flowing. The desperation is turning into fury in many cases as women lash out at the very men they once pushed away. They call it abandonment and betrayal, but from the other side, it looks like a rational exit from a bad deal. Men got tired of being emotional tampons and financial providers without reciprocity. They got tired of the lies and the gaslighting and the constant shifting of blame. They realized that debates and arguments with women rarely ended in mutual understanding because the foundation was always feelings over facts. So they stopped participating, they stopped pursuing, they stopped desiring the drama that came with it. And now women are left facing the harshness of reality without the buffer they once took for granted. This is the wake up call that was coming for a long time, and it is here now in full force. As we look deeper into the stories, you hear the same themes repeating with different women in different cities, but the outcome is identical. A woman who spent her 20s building a career and a social life based on the idea that men would always be available now finds herself in her 30s or 40s with mounting bills and no support network. She reaches out online, hoping for solutions or sympathy, but the responses from men are either absent or blunt because they have heard it too many times before. They know the pattern, they know the history, they know the movements and the shaming and the demands that led to this point. They choose peace instead of re entering the cycle. This choice has ripple effects that are only beginning to show in the broader society. Dating is dead in many circles. Relationships are rarer. The economic strain on women is increasing, and the panic is spreading. The late, great Kevin Samuels said it clearly when he talked about winter arriving, and that winter is here for the ideas that sold women a false bill of goods. Independence sounded good on paper, but in practice, it left many women broke and isolated when the support systems they rejected were no longer there to catch them. Men walked away, finding solitude and focus, and they are not coming back because the cost was too high and the rewards too low. Women believed their value was permanent and that men would always need them, but men have proven otherwise by choosing self reliance. The dating economy is dead because men have become wise to the free meal game and the one sided friendships. They are prioritizing their own resources and their own futures. This is the straightforward truth that is playing out right now, and it is only going to intensify as economic conditions continue to deteriorate. Let me paint another picture for you because these examples keep stacking up and each one drives the point home more clearly. Imagine the woman who used to get by on dates and male friends helping with bills or favors. She thought that would always be available because she believed men were driven by basic needs that she could fulfill on her terms. Now, those men are gone. They are focused on their own goals and they see no reason to invest in someone who offers no real partnership. The result is women living in cars or skipping meals or posting desperate pleas online. They feel betrayed, but the betrayal was in the expectations they built on a foundation of disrespect toward men. Men simply stopped playing along. They stopped being the safety net. They stopped shielding women from the consequences of their choices. And now reality is hitting full force. This is not a temporary trend. It is a fundamental shift that started years ago and has accelerated to the point where it is impossible to ignore. The simps have retreated online. The men who used to argue and debate have gone silent. The ones who used to pursue have walked away entirely. Women are left with the consequences of their collective choices, and the state is in no position to bail them out because the state is broke too. The massive meltdown that is coming will be worse than anything seen in modern history, and women without traditional support structures will bear the brunt of it. They have no paddle in this creek, and the current is getting stronger. The anger and the fury are understandable from their perspective, but from the other side, it is simply the end of a long one sided arrangement. Men are not rescuing this time, they are protecting their own peace and their own futures. The stories from social media are endless. Women admitting they cannot afford food without dates. Women complaining about empty events full of women but no men. Women lashing out at men for not approaching anymore. Each post reveals the same underlying issue. The dependence was always there even when it was denied. The support was taken for granted until it vanished. Now the panic is real and the desperation is growing. Men see it and they recognize it for what it is. They remember the years of being called dangerous or toxic. They remember the shaming and the punishment for simply existing. They remember how arguments always favored feelings over facts and left them drained. So they chose the only logical path. They walked away. They found peace. They kept their resources and they are not looking back. As the economic pressures build, the situation will only become more stark. Women who thought they were strong and independent are discovering the limits of that strength when the bills keep coming and the help is gone. Single mothers are struggling to feed their kids. Young women are facing homelessness. Older women are realizing their leverage has faded. The common thread is the absence of men who once filled those gaps. Men filled them at great personal cost and with little thanks, and now they have stopped. This is the sobering reality that needs to be faced. Winter has arrived, and the cold is setting in for the promises that we're never going to deliver. Men have moved on to their own lives, and women are left to navigate the consequences alone. This is the truth of the moment, and it is not going away. The pattern is clear, and it repeats across every level of society. From the big city apartments to the suburban homes, the story is the same. Women are broke because they bet on a system that told them men were optional and the state would always provide. That bet has failed. The state is broke. Men are gone. The safety nets are shredded. The result is desperation and anger directed at the very people who were pushed away. But the men are not returning. They have found something better in their solitude and their self focus. They have learned the lessons of the past decades and they are applying them daily. They keep their money. They protect their peace. They avoid the drama. This is the new reality, and it is here to stay. Friends, we are living through a shift that will define the next generation. Men walking away is not a protest, it is a rational choice based on experience and observation. Women are facing the harshness of that choice, and society is feeling the effects. The broke woman epidemic is spreading because the foundations were weak from the start. The movements and the shaming and the demands created the distance, and now the distance is complete. Women are up against the wall with no easy way out. The screams are louder, but the ears are closed. Men are done intervening. They are done buffering. They are done rescuing. Reality is here, and it is time to face it without the old illusions. This is the authoritative, raw truth that needs to be understood. Continuing on the same thread, you can see how the one sided nature of interactions played a major role in pushing men to this point. Female friendships for many men became exhausting because they involved giving attention and support without any real return. Women wanted the emotional labor and the help, but offered little in the way of balance. In romantic contexts, it was even more pronounced. Women sought the security and the benefits of a committed partner without delivering the commitment or the respect in return. Men saw this imbalance and they decided it was not worth the investment. They chose to keep their energy and their resources for themselves rather than pouring them into situations that left them depleted. This decision was not made lightly, but after repeated experiences that showed the same outcome. The gaslighting and the lies and the shifting blame all contributed to the final walkaway. Men are no longer willing to participate in arrangements that treat them as disposable providers. They have moved on, and the peace they have found is something they value highly. The economic conditions are making everything worse for women who are already vulnerable. The cost of living continues to climb while incomes stagnate for many. Without the extra support from men, the math simply does not work. Food becomes a luxury. Rent becomes a burden. Basic survival turns into a daily struggle. Many women are already living in their cars or couch surfing because the options have run out. They post about their situations, hoping for understanding, but the understanding from men has evaporated after years of being treated as the enemy. The betrayal narrative does not land because men know the history, they know the movements, they know the shaming, they know the demands, they know the one sided deals. So they stay away. This is the straightforward consequence of decades of choices, and it is playing out in real time across the country. Single events tell the story better than anything else. Women show up in large numbers hoping to connect and find support, but the men are missing. The few who do attend are often not interested in the same dynamic that led to the current mess. Men have learned to value their time and their money more highly. They are not showing up to be used as free meal tickets or emotional support systems. They have built lives that do not revolve around filling those roles anymore. The imbalance is obvious and it is growing. Women are left wondering what happened, but the answer is written in the history of how men were treated. The push to make men optional backfired when men actually became optional. The independence that was celebrated has left many women isolated and broke. The state cannot fix it. The old support networks are gone. The future looks uncertain, and the panic is understandable. But the change is irreversible. And this is the sobering wake up call that society needs right now. Men have walked away and they are staying away because the cost of staying was too high and the rewards too low. Women are feeling the full impact of that decision, and the desperation is showing in their words and their actions. The anger and the fury are directed at men, but the root cause lies in the choices made long ago. Feminism promised the world, but delivered isolation and financial strain. The movements that targeted men created the distance that now feels permanent. The shaming and the punishment for existing as a man pushed men out of the picture entirely. Now the picture is clear. Women are struggling to survive without the resources they once took for granted. Men are thriving in their solitude and their self focus. The gap is wide and it is not closing. This is the reality we are living in, and it is time to acknowledge it fully. The stories keep coming, and each one adds another layer to the truth. A woman in her car posts about her situation, explaining how she cannot afford rent without help. She blames men for not stepping up, but the men watching know the full context. They know how they were viewed as dangerous or toxic. They know how their efforts were dismissed or taken for granted. They know the pattern of demands without reciprocity. So they keep driving past the situation and focus on their own paths. This pattern repeats thousands of times across social media and in private conversations. The desperation is real. The financial struggle is real. The panic is real. But the solution is not in blaming men. The solution is in understanding how the choices led here and what can be done differently moving forward. Men have already made their choice. They have walked away and found peace. Women are now left to find their own way in a world that no longer provides the old safety nets. The Great Depression comparison is not an exaggeration when you look at the scale of the coming economic challenges. Debt is higher, costs are higher, support systems are weaker. Women who traded family and community for state promises are discovering the limits of those promises. The state is broke. The programs are overwhelmed. The safety nets that existed in the past are shredded. Women have no husbands, no boyfriends, no male friends, no fathers, no families, no communities. They are truly on their own for the first time in modern history, and the harshness of that reality is setting in. The screams of abandonment are loud, but men are not responding because they have learned that responding only perpetuates the cycle. They have stepped aside and let reality take its course. This is the raw truth that needs to be faced without illusion. Winter has arrived and the cold is biting. As we wrap up this part of the conversation, you can see how every piece fits together into a larger picture. Men walked away because the arrangement was no longer sustainable. Women are broke because they bet on a system that failed them. The dating economy is dead because men became informed and opted out. The social fabric is changing because the old dynamics no longer work. The future will be shaped by those who adapt to this new reality. Men are adapting by focusing on self. Women are struggling to adapt because the dependence was deeper than admitted. The state cannot fix it. The old narratives cannot fix it. Only facing the truth head on will bring any real progress. This is the authoritative message that cuts through the noise. Men have walked away. Women are facing the consequences. Society is adjusting. The change is here, and it is permanent. The desperation continues to build as more women share their stories online and in private. They talk about the struggle to buy food and pay rent without the help that used to come so easily. They talk about the empty single events and the lack of approaches from men. They talk about the loneliness and the financial pressure that keeps mounting. Each story points back to the same root causes: the rejection of traditional support structures, the embrace of movements that demonized men, the belief that independence would always be enough. The reality has proven otherwise, and the panic is the natural result. Men on the other side are living their lives without the drama and without the drain. They are keeping their resources and their peace, and they are not interested in re entering the old patterns. This divide is growing, and it is shaping the world we live in today. Friends, the truth is straightforward and it needs to be said clearly. Women are broke because they pushed away the very support that kept them afloat. Men walked away because they were treated as disposable and dangerous. The state cannot replace what was lost. The economic conditions are making everything harder. The future looks challenging for those who do not adapt. This is the sobering wake up call that everyone needs to hear. The choices of the past have consequences in the present. Men have made their choice. Women are living with the results. The conversation at the bar continues, but the facts remain the same. The walking away is real. The struggle is real. The change is real. And it is only beginning to show its full effects. To keep building on this, you see how the one sided friendships and relationships played such a big part in the decision for men to step back. Men gave time and attention and money and received little in return except demands and criticism. Women wanted the security without the commitment. They wanted the benefits without the balance. Men saw the pattern and they stopped participating. They stopped being the emotional support without reciprocity. They stopped being the financial provider without respect. They stopped being the safety net without gratitude. The gaslighting and the lies became too much. The arguments that went nowhere became too exhausting. The choice to walk away was the only logical step left. Now, women are feeling the absence and the panic is setting in because the gap is wide and the alternatives are few. The economic reality is hitting women harder than many want to admit. The cost of living has outpaced incomes for years, and the extra help from men was what made the difference for many. Without that help, the numbers do not add up. Food becomes scarce. Rent becomes impossible. Survival becomes a daily battle. Many women are already homeless or on the edge of it, living in their cars or with temporary arrangements. They reach out online, hoping for solutions. But the solutions from men have dried up because men have learned the lessons of the past. They know the history. They know the movements. They know the shaming. They know the demands. They know the one sided deals. So they stay focused on their own paths and their own futures. This is the new normal, and it is not changing anytime soon. The single events are the perfect illustration of the shift. Women fill the rooms hoping to find connection and support, but the men are not there in the numbers needed. The imbalance is obvious and it is growing. Men have found better uses for their time and their energy. They are building their own lives and protecting their own peace. They are not showing up to be used as free resources or emotional outlets. The game has changed, and women are left adjusting to the new rules. The desperation shows in their posts and their complaints, but the men are not responding because they have moved on. This is the reality that is playing out across the country, and it is only going to become more pronounced as time goes on. This is the authoritative raw truth that defines the current moment. Men have walked away and they are staying away. Women are broke and struggling to survive without the support they once had. The state is broke and cannot fill the gap. The economic conditions are worsening. The social dynamics have shifted permanently. The future will reward those who face these facts head on and adapt accordingly. For men, that means continued focus on self and peace. For women, that means coming to terms with the consequences of past choices. The bar is where we lay it all out honestly, and that is what we are doing. The truth is clear. The change is here. The wake up call is sounding. The stories from women across the country keep adding to the picture. They describe the financial strain and the loneliness and the confusion over why men have disappeared. They blame men for the situation, but the truth is the situation was created by the way men were treated for years. The movements and the shaming and the demands pushed men out. Now the absence is felt and the panic is real. Men are not coming back because the cost was too high and the peace they found is too valuable. They are keeping their resources and their focus on their own lives. Women are left to navigate the harsh reality without the old buffers. This is the sobering truth that needs to be understood fully. Winter has arrived, and the cold is here to stay. As the pressure mounts, the desperation grows, and the lashing out increases. Women call it betrayal, but men call it self-preservation. The divide is deep and it is based on years of experience. Men remember the exhaustion of arguments that never resolved anything. They remember the gaslighting and the lies. They remember the one-sided arrangements. They remember the lack of respect. So they chose distance. Women are now feeling the full weight of that distance, and the financial and emotional strain is mounting. The state cannot fix it. The old narratives cannot fix it. Only facing the truth can bring any real understanding. This is the moment where reality takes over and the illusions fall away. Men have walked away. Women are facing the consequences. The change is permanent, and the future will be shaped by how everyone responds to it. The pattern is consistent, and it shows no signs of reversing. Women are struggling with basic survival because the support systems they relied on are gone. Men are thriving in their solitude because they no longer carry the burden of one-sided deals. The economic squeeze is making the situation worse for everyone, but especially for women who bet on independence without the backup plan. The single events remain empty of men. The social media posts remain full of desperation. The anger remains directed at the wrong target. The truth remains the same. Men walked away for good reasons and they are not returning. Women are learning the hard way what that means. This is the raw, authoritative message that cuts to the core of the issue. The wake up call is here, and it is loud. To keep going with this, you see how the belief that men would always want women for sex or children was a major miscalculation. Men have proven that their own survival and peace come first. They are not chasing temporary pleasures at the cost of their resources and their well being. They are done with the crap that came with those pursuits. The lies and the gaslighting and the demands have lost their power. Men have silently exited the game and they are not looking back. Women are left with the results of that exit, and the panic is understandable, but the change is irreversible. The dating economy is dead. The free meal game is over. The one-sided friendships are finished. The new reality is here, and it favors those who adapt to self-reliance and mutual respect. Men have adapted. Women are still adjusting. The gap remains wide. The stories of homelessness and financial collapse among women are becoming more common. They live in their cars and post about their struggles, hoping for a solution. The solution from men is not coming because men have learned to protect themselves. They know the pattern, they know the history, they know the risks. They choose peace instead. This choice has consequences for women and for society as a whole. The state is broke and the safety nets are gone. The families and communities that once provided support were traded away for promises that never materialized. The result is a generation of women facing reality without the old protections. This is the sobering truth that defines our time. Men have walked away. Women are broke. The wake-up call is sounding and it is time to listen. The economic conditions continue to deteriorate, and the pressure on women increases with each passing month. Costs rise, incomes lag, the extra help from men is missing, the math does not work, and the struggle becomes daily. Single mothers feel it the hardest as they try to feed their kids and keep a roof over their heads without the support that used to be there. The state cannot step in fully. The programs are overwhelmed. The promises have failed. Women are left to face the harshness without the buffer. Men are not intervening because they have seen the cycle too many times. They know the outcome, they know the exhaustion, they know the futility. So they stay away and focus on their own paths. This is the new normal and it is spreading across the country. Friends, this is the authoritative raw picture of what is happening. Women are broke because they pushed men away and the support vanished. Men walked away because the arrangement was no longer worth the cost. The state is broke and cannot replace what was lost. The social dynamics have shifted permanently. The future will belong to those who face these facts and build accordingly. Men are building their own strength and peace. Women are learning the limits of the independence they chose. The bar is where we talk about these things without filters, and that is what we are doing. The truth is clear. The change is real. The wake up call is here. The desperation shows in the way women describe their daily lives. They talk about skipping meals to make rent. They talk about the loneliness of empty social scenes. They talk about the anger toward men for not approaching. Each word reveals the dependence that was always there. The independence was an illusion that collapsed when the support stopped. Men saw the illusion for what it was and they stopped participating. They stopped being the providers without respect. They stopped being the emotional outlets without balance. They stopped being the safety net without gratitude. The peace they found in solitude is something they value more than ever. Women are left to adjust to the absence, and the adjustment is painful. This is the reality we are living, and it is only going to become more defined as time passes. The single events and the social media posts paint the same picture over and over. Women in large numbers, but men in small numbers or none at all. The imbalance is the result of years of imbalance in the other direction. Men were pushed out and now they stay out. Women are feeling the full effect and the panic is growing. The economic strain is adding fuel to the fire. The cost of living is high and the resources are low. The state is not the answer. The old support networks are gone. The future looks challenging, and the choices of the past are coming due. Men are not rescuing this time. They are protecting their own futures. This is the straightforward truth that needs to be accepted. Winter has arrived and the cold is setting in for good. As we continue to lay this out, you see how the movements and the shaming played such a key role in creating the distance. Women were encouraged to view men as the problem and to demand space and autonomy at all costs. The campaigns painted men as dangerous and toxic. The shaming for being men became normal. The punishment for existing became common. Men absorbed it for years, and then they chose to remove themselves from the equation. The arguments that never went anywhere became too much. The gaslighting and the lies became too obvious. The one sided deals became too costly. The walk away was the rational response, and it has become widespread. Women are now living with the results, and the financial and emotional strain is real. The desperation is real. The anger is real, but the change is real too, and it is not reversing. The broke woman epidemic is spreading because the foundations were weak. The promises of independence and state support did not deliver. The rejection of men and traditional structures left a void that cannot be filled. Men have filled their own lives with purpose and peace. Women are left to fill the void on their own. The economic conditions are making the void larger. The social fabric is thinner. The safety nets are gone. The future will test those who remain. Men have tested the waters of solitude, and they like what they found. Women are testing the waters of full independence, and they are finding them cold. This is the sobering picture that defines the current moment. The wake up call is loud, and it is time to hear it. The stories of women living in cars and struggling with basic bills are becoming the norm rather than the exception. They reach out for help, but the help from men is not forthcoming. Men have learned to protect their resources and their energy. They know the pattern too well. They know the history too clearly. They know the risks too personally. So they choose self preservation. This choice has consequences that women are feeling daily. The panic sets in and the lashing out increases, but the men stay away. The cycle is broken and the new reality is here. This is the authoritative truth that cuts through the noise. Men have walked away. Women are broke. The change is permanent. The future is being shaped by this shift. To keep expanding the point, the belief that men would always pursue women for basic reasons was a fundamental misjudgment. Men have shown that their own survival and peace come before temporary pursuits. They are done with the crap that came with those pursuits. The demands and the gaslighting have lost their hold. The peace and solitude is too valuable to give up. Women are left facing the absence and the financial strain that comes with it. The dating scene is dead. The free meal game is over. The one sided arrangements are finished. The new normal favors self reliance and mutual respect. Men have embraced it. Women are still coming to terms with it. The gap remains and it is widening. The economic pressures are unrelenting and they hit women who lack support the hardest. The cost of food and rent keeps climbing while the help that used to bridge the gap is gone. Single mothers struggle to provide for their kids. Young women face the edge of homelessness. Older women see their leverage fade. The common thread is the absence of men who once filled those roles. Men filled them at great cost and with little return. Now they have stopped. This is the straightforward consequence of the way things were handled for years. The state cannot step in to fix it fully. The old networks are gone. The reality is harsh and it is here. Men are not intervening, they are protecting their own. This is the raw truth of the moment. The single events remain a clear sign of the shift. Women show up hoping for connection. Men stay away because the connection no longer serves them. The imbalance is the result of years of imbalance in the other direction. Men were pushed and they stepped back permanently. Women are feeling the effect and the desperation is growing. The social media posts reflect the same struggle. The financial pressure is real. The loneliness is real. The anger is real. But the men are not returning. They have found something better. This is the new reality and it is spreading. The wake up call is here and it is time to face it squarely. Friends, the picture is complete and it is sobering. Women are broke because they rejected the support that kept them stable. Men walked away because the support came at too high a price. The state is broke and the promises have failed. The economic conditions are worsening. The social dynamics have changed forever. The future will reward those who adapt to the truth. Men have adapted by focusing on self. Women are learning the hard way what independence really means. The bar is where we talk about these things without filters, and the truth is clear. The walking away is complete. The struggle is real. The change is here. The wake up call is sounding, and it will not stop until the lessons are learned. The desperation continues to show in new stories every day. Women describe the daily battle with bills and food and housing. They wonder why men have disappeared. They blame men for the situation. The truth is, the situation was created by the way men were treated and pushed away. Men remember the exhaustion and the futility. They remember the gaslighting and the demands. They remember the lack of reciprocity. So they stay away and focus on their own lives. The peace they have found is something they will not give up. Women are left to adjust to the absence, and the adjustment is difficult. The economic strain makes it harder. The state cannot help enough. The old support is gone. This is the reality we are living, and it is only going to become more clear. The pattern repeats across every level of society. The broke woman epidemic is not limited to one group or one city. It is widespread because the choices were widespread. The rejection of men was widespread. The dependence on state promises was widespread. The results are widespread. Men have responded with widespread withdrawal. The balance has shifted and the consequences are being felt. This is the authoritative message that needs to be heard. The truth is straightforward. The change is permanent. The future is being written by those who face the facts. Men are facing them by protecting their peace. Women are facing them by dealing with the strain. The bar conversation continues, but the facts stay the same. As the pressure builds, the lashing out increases, but the men remain distant. The anger does not bring them back. The guilt trips do not work anymore. The narratives have lost their power. Men have seen through them. They have lived the consequences of engaging with them. They have chosen a different path. Women are now living the consequences of that choice, and the financial and emotional impact is deep. The homelessness stories are increasing. The struggle stories are increasing. The panic is increasing. The truth remains. Men walked away for good reasons. Women are facing the results. The wake up call is here, and it is time to listen. The stories of women in their cars and struggling with basic survival add layer after layer to the same core issue. The support is gone. The resources are limited. The options are few. The dependence was deeper than admitted. The independence was an illusion that collapsed. Men saw the illusion and they stopped participating in it. They stopped being the providers without respect. They stopped being the emotional outlets without balance. They stopped being the safety net without gratitude. The peace and solitude is their reward. The struggle for women is their consequence. This is the sobering truth that defines the current time. The economic conditions are making it worse. The social fabric is thinner. The change is permanent. The single events and the social media landscape tell the same story. The imbalance is obvious, the desperation is obvious, the shift is obvious. Men are not showing up because showing up no longer serves them. Women are showing up hoping for the old dynamic, but the old dynamic is dead. The free meal game is over. The one sided friendships are over. The new normal is self focus and mutual respect, or nothing at all. Men have chosen the self focus. Women are left to find their way. This is the raw reality, and it is spreading. The wake up call is loud. The truth is clear. The future will be shaped by how everyone responds. Friends, this is the picture we are painting with the facts as they stand. Women are broke because the support they pushed away is gone. Men walked away because the cost was too high. The state cannot replace the lost support. The economic conditions are adding pressure. The social dynamics have shifted for good. The future belongs to those who adapt. Men have adapted. Women are in the process of learning what adaptation means in this new world. The bar is where we lay it out honestly. The truth is straightforward. The change is real. The wake up call is sounding, and it will continue until the lessons sink in. To drive the point home further, the belief that men would always need women for basic reasons was a major error in judgment. Men have shown that their own survival and peace are the priority. They are done with the demands and the gaslighting. They are done with the lies and the one sided deals. The peace they have found is too valuable. Women are left with the absence and the strain that comes with it. The dating scene is dead for the old patterns. The resources stay with men. The focus stays on self. This is the new normal, and it favors those who embrace it. Men have embraced it. Women are still adjusting. The gap is there, and it is not closing soon. The economic pressures are unrelenting. The cost of living rises. The incomes lag. The help from men is missing. The struggle becomes daily for many women. Single mothers feel it deeply as they try to provide for their kids. Young women face the edge of homelessness. Older women see their options fade. The common thread is the absence of the support that was once taken for granted. Men stopped providing it because the return was not there. They stopped engaging because the cycle was exhausting. They stopped pursuing because the risk outweighed the rewards. This is the straightforward truth. The state cannot fix it fully. The old networks are gone. The reality is harsh, and it is here to stay. The single events remain empty of men. The social media posts remain full of desperation. The anger remains directed at men. The truth remains the same. Men walked away for good reasons, and they are staying away. Women are learning what that means in practical terms. The financial strain is real. The emotional strain is real. The panic is real. The change is real. This is the authoritative, raw picture of the moment. The wake up call is here. The lessons are being learned the hard way. The future will reflect those lessons. The stories keep coming, and they all point to the same conclusion. Women are struggling without the support they rejected. Men are at peace without the burden they carried. The state is broke and the promises have failed. The economic conditions are worsening. The social fabric is changing. The shift is permanent. Men have chosen their path. Women are facing the consequences. This is the sobering truth that needs to be faced. Winter has arrived and the cold is setting in. The bar conversation lays it out clearly. The facts are straightforward. The change is here. The wake up call is sounding. As we keep unpacking this, the one sided nature of the old arrangements becomes even clearer. Men gave without receiving balance, women took without giving reciprocity. The pattern repeated until men stopped it. They stopped being the emotional tampons. They stopped being the walking wallets. They stopped being the safety nets. The gaslighting lost its power. The lies lost their hold. The peace and solitude became the priority. Women are now feeling the absence, and the strain is mounting. The financial pressure is increasing. The loneliness is increasing. The desperation is increasing. The truth is not changing. Men have walked away. The support is gone. The reality is here. The economic squeeze is hitting women who lack the old support the hardest. The bills pile up, the food becomes scarce, the rent becomes impossible, the homelessness stories increase, the struggle becomes daily. The state cannot step in to cover it all. The programs are overwhelmed. The promises have failed. Men are not stepping in because they have learned the lessons. They know the pattern. They know the history. They know the risks. They choose self preservation. This is the new normal and it is spreading. The panic is understandable. The anger is understandable. The change is irreversible. This is the raw truth of our time. The single events show the imbalance clearly. Women fill the space, men stay away. The dynamic has shifted. The old game is over. The new rules favor self focus. Men have embraced the new rules. Women are adjusting to them. The desperation shows. The posts show it. The stories show it. The truth remains. Men walked away. Women are facing the consequences. The wake up call is here. The lessons will be learned. The future will reflect the adaptation or the lack of it. Friends, the picture is complete and it is sobering. The broke woman epidemic is real because the support was rejected. The men walking away is real because the cost was too high. The state is broke and the safety nets are gone. The economic conditions are adding pressure. The social dynamics have changed for good. The future will reward those who face the facts. Men have faced them. Women are in the process. The bar is where we talk about it honestly. The truth is clear. The change is permanent. The wake up call is sounding and it will not stop. The desperation continues to build with new stories daily. Women describe the battle with survival. They wonder about the missing men. They blame the men. The truth is, the blame lies in the choices that pushed men away. Men remember the exhaustion. They remember the futility. They remember the one sided deals. They stay away. The peace is too valuable. The strain for women is too real. The economic pressure makes it worse. The state cannot help enough. The reality is harsh. This is the authoritative message. Men have walked away. Women are broke. The change is here. The pattern is consistent across society. The epidemic is widespread. The withdrawal is widespread. The consequences are widespread. The shift is permanent. Men have chosen self. Women are learning independence the hard way. The state cannot fix it. The old narratives cannot fix it. The truth is the only path forward. This is the sobering wake up call. The bar lays it out. The facts are straightforward. The future is being shaped now. Now, think about the kids growing up in the middle of all this, because that is where the real long term damage starts to show itself in ways that nobody wants to talk about openly, but everyone feels in their gut when they look around at the younger crowd today. These children, especially the boys, are watching their mothers struggle financially and emotionally after years of pushing away stable men, and they are learning lessons that will shape how they approach life and relationships when their turn comes. The girls are seeing the same thing and absorbing the idea that independence means going it alone, even when the bills pile up and the support vanishes, leaving them vulnerable in a world that does not care about feelings or past promises. Families that once had two parents providing balance are now single mother households scraping by without the male figure who used to handle the heavy lifting, both literally and figuratively. And the ripple effect hits the children hardest because they did not choose this path, their parents did. You sit there at the bar with your buddies and you hear stories from guys who have sons or nephews who are already deciding early on that they will not repeat the mistakes of the previous generation. They see the stress and the arguments and the financial strain, and they make a quiet promise to themselves to build something solid on their own terms instead of risking it all on someone who might turn around and treat them as optional. The birth rates are dropping fast across the board because men are choosing not to start families at all when they look at the legal risks and the emotional costs and the financial drain that comes with modern relationships. And that means fewer kids entering the world who could have grown up with both parents providing a stable foundation. Society keeps talking about population decline as some abstract problem, but when you connect it back to men walking away, it becomes clear that the choices made in the name of independence are creating a demographic shift that will leave entire generations smaller and more strained as the years roll on. Men are using this time to build themselves up in ways that feel real and lasting instead of pouring everything into situations that used to leave them empty. And that shift is visible in how they spend their days and their money now. They hit the gym consistently, not for show, but because physical strength gives them confidence and control over their own bodies after years of feeling like they were just tools for someone else. They learn new skills through online courses or hands on projects, turning their focus toward trades or tech or small businesses that let them keep the profits for themselves rather than handing them over in the form of dates or bills or endless support. Travel becomes a priority for many of them because they can pack up and see the world without negotiating or compromising on someone who might not value the experience the same way. And that freedom tastes different when you realize you earned it through your own discipline. Hobbies that used to take a back seat now fill their evenings, whether it is fishing or gaming or restoring old cars. And these activities bring a quiet satisfaction that no one can take away because they are not tied to anyone else's approval or demands. The guys you talk to at the bar describe this phase as waking up after a long fog they invested in their health, their finances, and their minds. And the peace that comes with it is something they protect fiercely because they remember how quickly it used to disappear when they tried to make things work in the old way. This personal growth is not about revenge or anger. It is about survival and self respect. And it is happening on a scale that is changing the entire male population one man at a time. Social media has turned into a mirror that reflects the desperation back at everyone involved, and it amplifies the divide in ways that make the situation even harder to ignore. Women post their struggles hoping for sympathy or solutions from the very audience that has already checked out, and the comment sections fill with blunt truths from men who have seen enough to know the pattern by heart. The algorithms push these stories to the top because outrage and raw honesty drive engagement. But the end result is men seeing confirmation after confirmation that their decision to step back was the right one, while women watch their feeds fill with evidence that the old rules no longer apply. Influencers on both sides throw fuel on the fire. Some pushing the narrative that men need to return to their provider roles, and others highlighting the freedom that comes from opting out entirely. And the back and forth creates a constant noise that keeps everyone engaged but rarely changes minds. You see young women sharing their daily expenses and wondering aloud why no one is stepping up to help. And the responses from men are short and direct, pointing out that the help used to come with expectations that were never met, and now the ledger is closed. This online landscape has become a battlefield of ideas where the truth about the walking away gets repeated in countless threads and videos until it sinks in as the new baseline for how things operate. The raw honesty that used to stay in private conversations at places like this bar now spills out publicly, and it forces everyone to confront the reality without the filters that used to soften the edges. The legal system played a massive part in pushing men toward this exit because the rules were stacked in ways that made any commitment feel like a high stakes gamble with everything to lose. Divorce courts routinely favor one side when it comes to custody and assets, and men watch friends or family members get cleaned out financially while still being expected to pay support long after the relationship ended. False accusations became a weapon that could destroy reputations and careers before any evidence was even examined. And the fear of that happening kept many guys from even considering long term involvement. Child support orders came down hard and stayed in place, even when the other parent made choices that increased the burden instead of sharing it fairly. And men learned that signing up for family life could mean signing up for a lifetime of obligations without any guarantee of fairness or respect. The laws that were meant to protect vulnerable people ended up creating a system where men felt like they had no voice and no protection. Once things went south, and that realization spread quietly through conversations and shared experiences until it became common knowledge. Well, you hear the stories from the guys around you, the ones who went through it and came out the other side, determined never to put themselves in that position again. And their advice to the younger crowd is simple: stay smart, stay separate, and keep your assets and your freedom intact. This legal imbalance did not happen overnight, but once it took hold, it accelerated the walking away, because no rational person wants to enter a contract where one party holds all the cards and the other holds all the risk. Psychologically, the impact on women is starting to show in patterns that go deeper than just the financial stress, and it creates a kind of quiet regret that builds over time as they face the reality of their choices. Many are dealing with anxiety that comes from the constant pressure of making ends meet without the buffer that used to exist, and that anxiety turns into frustration that gets directed outward instead of inward, where the real reflection needs to happen. The loneliness sets in differently for them because the social circles they built often revolved around the idea that men were secondary, and now those circles feel hollow when the practical support is missing. Some start to question the path they took, but the cultural messaging around them makes it hard to admit any fault, so the internal conflict stays buried under layers of anger or denial. The mental load of handling everything alone weighs heavier than anyone admits publicly, and it shows up in health issues or burnout or a general sense of exhaustion that no amount of self care trends can fix. Men on the other side are experiencing a different kind of psychological shift. They feel lighter and more in control because they are no longer carrying the emotional weight of trying to fix situations that were never theirs to fix in the first place. The bar talk often turns to this contrast: how one group is discovering the limits of going it alone, while the other is discovering the strength that comes from focusing inward, and that difference is becoming more pronounced with each passing year. True adaptation for anyone caught in this shift means looking at the facts without the rose colored glasses and making changes that align with the new reality instead of wishing for the old one to return. For women, it would involve rebuilding networks that include men as equals rather than optional extras, and learning to offer value in relationships that goes beyond what social media tells them is enough. It means taking responsibility for financial decisions earlier in life and building skills that create real independence instead of dependence disguised as empowerment. For men, adaptation is already happening through the choices they make daily to invest in themselves and protect their peace. But it also means staying open to genuine connections if they ever appear on terms that feel balanced. Society as a whole would adapt by rethinking the policies and cultural messages that created this divide in the first place and encouraging mutual respect instead of one sided demands. The people who figure this out early will come out stronger because they stop fighting the current and start swimming with it towards something more sustainable. You see glimpses of this adaptation in the younger crowd who grew up watching the mess unfold and decided to write their own rules from the start. And those glimpses give a hint of what could be possible if more people followed suit. Looking ahead to the rest of 2026 and the years beyond, the trends are pointing toward an even wider gap unless something fundamental changes in how people approach each other. More men will continue to opt out as the information spreads and the examples multiply, and that will leave the dating and family landscape even more imbalanced than it is now. Women who are already feeling the pinch will face tighter economic conditions as costs keep rising and support keeps shrinking, and the stories of struggle will become more common rather than less. Birth rates may dip lower as fewer people choose to bring children into a world that feels unstable, and that creates long term pressure on everything from schools to the workforce to the economy itself. The cultural conversation will keep evolving, with some voices calling for a return to balance and others digging in deeper to the old narratives, but the lived experiences of everyday people will keep pulling the truth to the surface. Technology and remote work might give men even more options to build lives that do not revolve around traditional expectations, and that freedom will make the walking away feel even more natural. The sobering part is that none of this is happening in secret anymore. The evidence is everywhere if you pay attention, and the wake up call is getting louder for anyone willing to listen. The guys who have fully embraced this new chapter often describe a sense of clarity that comes from knowing exactly where their energy goes, and it changes how they show up in every area of life. They set goals around career advancement or skill building, and they hit them without the distractions that used to pull them in different directions. Their finances improve because they are not splitting resources or covering extras for someone else. And that security gives them options they never had before. Socially, they stick to circles where the conversations feel honest and the friendships are based on shared interests rather than obligation. And that filters out the noise that used to drain them. Physically, they prioritize sleep and training and nutrition because they see their bodies as the foundation for everything else. And the results show in their energy levels and their outlook. These men are not hiding from the world, they are engaging with it on their own terms. And the peace they protect becomes a magnet for others who see the difference. At the bar, you hear them talk about it like a quiet revolution that started in small decisions and grew into a complete lifestyle shift. And it resonates because so many others are on the same path or thinking about joining it. Children caught in the middle of these changing dynamics are absorbing lessons about self reliance and caution that will influence their adult choices in profound ways. Boys who see their fathers or uncles living independently learn that strength comes from within and that relationships should add to life rather than subtract from it, and they carry that forward into their own interactions. Girls who watch the struggles around them start to question the stories they were told about independence, and they begin to seek out examples of a balance that actually work instead of the ones that sound good on paper. The absence of consistent male role models in many homes creates a void that schools or media try to fill. But nothing replaces the real thing, and the long term effects show up in how these kids form bonds later on. Families that manage to keep both parents involved despite the pressures become the exception rather than the rule. And the children from those homes notice the difference immediately because stability feels different when it is present every day. The demographic numbers reflect this shift as fewer young people choose to pair up and start families of their own. And that creates a chain reaction that touches everything from housing markets to social services. You talk about it with your friends, and the agreement is the same. The next generation is inheriting a world that looks very different from the one their parents grew up expecting, and they are adapting faster than anyone predicted. Social media keeps feeding the cycle by showing women the harsh realities of their choices while simultaneously showing men the validation of their decisions, and that constant exposure makes the divide feel even more solid. Posts from women describing their monthly expenses and the gap left by absent male support get shared widely, and the replies from men lay out the reasons why that support is no longer available in the same way. The platform dynamics reward raw storytelling, so the most honest accounts rise to the top. And they paint a picture that is hard to dispute once you have seen enough of them. Men scroll through these threads and see their own past experiences reflected back at them, which reinforces their choice to stay out of the fray. Women see the volume of similar stories, and the pattern becomes impossible to ignore, even if the full admission takes time. Influencers on the topic range from those calling for accountability to those denying any problem exists, and the clash keeps the conversation alive. But the underlying data from real lives keeps pointing in one direction. The bar feels like the offline version of these discussions where the filters come off and the truth flows more freely because there is no algorithm deciding what gets amplified. This digital mirror is forcing a reckoning that might have taken longer without it, and the pace of change is picking up because of how quickly ideas spread now. Legal hurdles continue to shape the choices men make because the system has not caught up to the reality that many are simply refusing to participate under the old terms. Court decisions that treat men as automatic providers, even after relationships end, create a deterrent that is hard to overlook when planning any kind of long term commitment. Custody battles often leave fathers with limited time and heavy financial obligations, while mothers receive the default advantage, and that imbalance gets discussed in private groups and forums until it becomes part of the collective knowledge. Accusations that can derail lives before any proof is required make men cautious about who they let close, and that caution turns into distance over time. The financial risks of marriage or even cohabitation feel too high when the exit costs are so one sided, and men respond by keeping things casual or non existent when it comes to legal entanglements. Lawyers and advisors who work with men in these situations hear the same stories repeatedly, and they pass along the practical advice to protect assets and avoid situations that could lead to unfair outcomes. This legal landscape did not create the walking away on its own, but it certainly accelerated it by removing any sense of fairness or security for one side of the equation. The result is a generation of men who view commitment through the lens of risk management rather than romance, and that perspective is spreading as more of them share their experiences. The mental and emotional effects on women run deeper than the surface level complaints about money or loneliness, and they manifest in ways that affect daily life and long term well being. The constant pressure of handling responsibilities alone leads to burnout that no amount of motivational content can fix, and it leaves many feeling depleted even on good days. Regret starts to creep in during quiet moments when they reflect on paths not taken, but the surrounding culture discourages open discussion of that regret, so it stays internalized and builds tension. Anxiety about the future becomes a background noise that never quite goes away because the safety net they counted on turned out to be thinner than expected. Some women begin to reach out in small ways, testing the waters for different approaches. But the trust has been eroded on both sides, and rebuilding takes effort that not everyone is willing to invest. Men who have stepped back report feeling clear headed and more optimistic because they are no longer navigating the emotional minefield that used to define their interactions. The contrast between the two experiences highlights how the shift has created two very different psychological realities, and the gap between them is not closing quickly. At the bar, the conversation often circles back to this difference because it explains so much about why the old patterns are not returning. Adaptation on a broader scale would require honest conversations about what actually works in relationships and society rather than clinging to ideas that have already shown their limits. Women who want to change the trajectory would focus on self sufficiency first and then build connections based on mutual benefit instead of one way support. Men who are thriving in their independence could choose to re engage if the terms feel fair, but they have no obligation to do so, and that choice is theirs alone. Cultural leaders and policymakers would need to address the legal and social imbalances that fueled the exit in the first place and encourage balance instead of division. The younger generation is already showing signs of figuring this out on their own by setting boundaries early and prioritizing personal development over rushed commitments. The people who succeed in this new environment are the ones who stop expecting the world to return to how it was and start creating lives that fit the current facts. This kind of adaptation is not easy, but it is necessary, and the ones who embrace it will find more stability in the long run. The outlook for the coming years points toward continued separation unless a major cultural correction takes place, and the evidence suggests that correction is not happening anytime soon. Men will keep investing in themselves and their own circles as the benefits become clearer with each success story. Women will continue to navigate the financial and emotional challenges of going it alone, and some will make adjustments while others double down on the old approach. Birth rates may stabilize at lower levels as fewer people see family as a viable option under current conditions, and that will put pressure on economies that rely on growth. Social media will keep documenting the divide in real time, giving everyone a front row seat to the changes whether they want one or not. Legal reforms, if they ever come, will take time. And in the meantime, men will vote with their feet by staying out of situations that feel too risky. The overall picture is one of a society adjusting to a new normal where individual choices have collective consequences, and those consequences are becoming harder to ignore. The sobering truth is that this shift is reshaping everything from personal lives to national demographics, and the people who understand it early will be better prepared for what comes next. You hear men describe their daily routines now, and it sounds like a different world from the one they left behind because the focus is entirely on what serves them long term. Morning workouts give them energy that lasts through the day, and they use that energy to tackle projects that build their skills or their bank accounts instead of draining them. Evenings are for reading or learning or simple relaxation without the pressure of constant availability. And that downtime recharges them in ways that feel restorative. Weekends might involve road trips or skill building workshops or time with friends who share the same mindset, and those activities strengthen bonds that are based on respect rather than obligation. The financial freedom that comes from not supporting someone else allows them to save or invest or enjoy experiences that were once out of reach, and they protect that freedom because they remember how fragile it felt before. This lifestyle is not about isolation, it is about intentional living, and it attracts others who are tired of the old cycle and ready for something that feels more authentic. The bar becomes a place where these stories get swapped, and the common thread is gratitude for the clarity that the walking away brought them. The impact on children extends beyond the immediate family into the larger community as schools and neighborhoods adjust to smaller family sizes and different dynamics. Teachers notice the boys who lack consistent male guidance, and they try to fill the gap, but the results are mixed because nothing replaces the real presence of a father or mentor who is invested daily. Girls grow up seeing the struggles and they form their own ideas about what they want in life, some choosing caution and others repeating patterns without realizing it. Community programs that once relied on two-parent households now scramble to provide support that used to come naturally from families, and the strain shows in budgets and outcomes. The next generation is learning resilience in some ways and caution in others, and they will carry those lessons into their adult years, shaping society in ways we can only guess at now. The demographic slowdown that comes with lower birth rates affects everything from housing demand to workforce size, and it forces a rethink of how economies are built when growth is no longer guaranteed. This is the long game that started with individual choices, and it is playing out on a scale that touches everyone, whether they are directly involved or not. Social media continues to serve as both a mirror and a magnifying glass, showing the raw details of the shift while spreading them faster than traditional conversations ever could. Women sharing their unfiltered experiences with bills and loneliness find their posts gaining traction, not because of sympathy, but because the honesty resonates across the divide. Men watching from the sidelines see the same patterns they lived through, and it solidifies their resolve to stay on their chosen path. The comment sections turn into informal debates where facts and feelings clash openly, and the sheer volume of voices makes it clear that this is not a fringe issue anymore. Algorithms push the most engaging content, so the stories of struggle and success on both sides keep rising to the top, keeping the conversation alive around the clock. Influencers who speak directly to the topic gain large followings because people are hungry for explanations that match their lived experiences, and the divide between those explanations grows sharper over time. The offline version of this happens right here at the bar, where the same topics get discussed without the need for likes or shares, and the truth flows just as freely. This constant documentation of the change is accelerating awareness and forcing more people to pick a side or find their own middle ground. Legal realities remain a driving force behind many men's decisions because the system has not adapted to the fact that participation is now optional for one half of the population. Court outcomes that favor one parent in custody and support cases create a chilling effect that spreads through word of mouth and shared experiences until it becomes part of the cultural knowledge base. Men who have been through the process or watched others go through it advise the younger ones to think twice before signing any legal documents that could bind them for decades. The financial obligations that follow separation often feel disproportionate to the actual involvement, and that disproportion makes the risk feel too high for many. Accusations that can be made with minimal evidence still carry heavy consequences in the short term, and that possibility alone keeps men cautious about who they allow into their lives. Legal professionals who specialize in these cases see the same patterns repeat, and they pass along practical strategies for protection. But the simplest strategy for many is simply not to enter the arena at all. This legal environment did not single handedly cause the walking away, but it certainly made the decision easier for those who were already on the fence. The result is a growing population of men who view long term commitments through the lens of self preservation first and everything else second. The emotional weight that women carry now shows up in subtle ways that affect their health and their outlook on life as the reality settles in over months and years. The daily grind of managing everything without backup leads to a kind of quiet fatigue that builds until it becomes the new normal, and many stop noticing how much it drains them. Moments of reflection bring questions about past decisions, but the external messages around them discourage deep dives into that territory, so the questions stay unanswered. Relationships with friends and family take on new importance as they seek support, but those networks can only stretch so far when the practical needs are so great. Some begin to experiment with different approaches, reaching out in small ways or adjusting their expectations. But trust has to be rebuilt slowly on both sides, and that process takes patience that not everyone has. Men who have distanced themselves report feeling more balanced because they are no longer trying to solve problems that were never theirs to own, and that balance shows in their interactions and their general demeanor. The difference between the two groups is becoming more noticeable as time passes, and it highlights how the shift has created separate paths with separate outcomes. Adaptation requires a willingness to look at the evidence and adjust behavior accordingly rather than waiting for the world to bend back to old expectations. Women who succeed in this environment build real skills and real savings, and they approach connections with a sense of equality that was missing before. Men who are already thriving could open the door to new relationships if the dynamic feels right, but they have learned to value their peace highly and they will not compromise it lightly. Broader society would benefit from policies that promote fairness in family matters and cultural messages that emphasize mutual respect over division. The younger people who are coming of age now are watching and learning, and many of them are choosing paths that avoid the pitfalls they saw in the previous generation. This kind of adaptation is happening in pockets across the country, and those pockets are growing as the lessons sink in. The people who figure it out will find more stability, and the ones who do not will continue to feel the strain until they do. The future beyond 2026 looks like a continuation of the current trends, unless a significant course correction happens at the cultural or legal level. Men will keep prioritizing their own development, and the lifestyles they have built will become even more attractive as the benefits compound over time. Women will face ongoing challenges as the economic pressures mount and the support networks remain thin, and some will adapt while others struggle to find their footing. Demographic changes will continue with lower birth rates affecting everything from education to retirement systems and forcing a rethink of how society sustains itself. Social media will keep shining a light on the divide, documenting both the struggles and the successes in real time and keeping the conversation front and center. Legal frameworks may see some updates, but change moves slowly, and men will continue to act based on the current reality in the meantime. The overall trajectory is toward greater individual self reliance on all sides, and the outcomes will depend on how well people navigate that new terrain. The sobering part is that the choices made today will define the landscape for decades, and the evidence suggests that many are already committed to their paths. Men talk about their routines with a sense of pride that comes from knowing they built them from the ground up without relying on anyone else to hold them together. They structure their days around priorities that matter to them personally, and that structure brings a calm that was missing when their time was divided between work and other people's needs. Fitness becomes a cornerstone because it translates into confidence and capability in every other area, and they protect that time like the asset it is. Learning new things, whether through books or projects or conversations, keeps their minds sharp and gives them an edge in their careers or side ventures. Social time is selective and meaningful because they choose people who add value rather than drain it, and those friendships deepen over time. Financial decisions focus on growth and security because they have seen what happens when resources are spread too thin and they refuse to repeat that pattern. This way of living feels sustainable and it spreads as more men discover the benefits for themselves. The bar becomes a hub for sharing these insights, and the collective wisdom grows with each visit. The effects on children play out over years as they move from childhood into adulthood, carrying the lessons they absorbed from the environment around them. Boys who grew up seeing limited male involvement learn to value their own independence early, and they approach relationships with caution that comes from observation rather than personal failure. Girls who witness the financial and emotional strain start to question the narratives they were fed, and many of them seek out examples of balance that actually deliver results. Schools and communities adjust to the changing family structures by offering programs that try to fill the gaps, but the core need for consistent parental involvement remains, and the outcomes reflect that reality. The smaller number of children entering the world means tighter resources in some areas and broader opportunities in others, and the next generation will navigate those conditions with the mindset they developed along the way. This demographic shift is not just numbers on a chart, it is lives being shaped in real time, and the long term effects will touch every part of society. Social media acts as a constant feed of evidence, showing both sides of the divide in unfiltered detail, and that feed influences how people think and act moving forward. Women posting about their challenges find their stories gaining visibility because they tap into shared experiences that resonate widely. Men observing the pattern recognize the familiar dynamics, and it reinforces their decision to stay focused on their own path. The interactions in comment sections and threads turn into public debates where raw opinions clash and the honesty cuts through the noise that used to surround the topic. Algorithms favor content that sparks engagement, so the most direct accounts rise to the top and they keep the awareness high across the platform. Influencers who address the issue directly build audiences because their message matches what people are seeing in their own lives, and that creates a feedback loop that accelerates understanding. The offline counterpart happens in places like this bar, where the same topics get explored without the need for digital validation, and the truth emerges just as clearly. This ongoing documentation of the shift is making it impossible to pretend the change is not happening, and it is pushing more people to confront it directly. Legal considerations continue to weigh heavily on men's choices because the current framework has not evolved to match the new reality of optional participation. Court rulings that assign disproportionate responsibility create a deterrent that influences decisions long before any relationship begins. Custody arrangements that favor one parent leave the other with limited access and ongoing obligations, and that imbalance gets discussed openly among men who have experienced it or seen it happen to others. The potential for accusations with lasting consequences makes caution the default approach for many, and that caution turns into distance over time. Financial risks associated with separation or divorce feel too steep when the system appears one sided, and men respond by avoiding the legal entanglements altogether. Professionals in the field see the patterns repeat, and they offer advice centered on protection. But the most effective protection for many is simply not entering the system in the first place. This legal backdrop did not create the walking away single handedly, but it provided strong reasons for men to step back and stay back. The outcome is a growing group of men who approach any form of commitment with self preservation as the top priority. The emotional burden women carry manifests in patterns that affect their daily functioning and their long term outlook as the reality becomes more permanent. The ongoing responsibility of managing life without the previous support leads to a fatigue that settles in and becomes part of the background. Reflection on past paths brings moments of doubt, but external pressures discourage exploring those doubts fully so they remain unresolved. Social connections take on greater importance as they seek stability, but those connections can only provide so much when practical needs are pressing. Some women begin testing new approaches by adjusting their expectations or reaching out differently, but rebuilding trust requires consistent effort from both sides. Men who have distanced themselves describe feeling more centered because they are no longer attempting to manage situations outside their control, and that centered feeling shows in their overall approach to life. The contrast between the groups highlights how the shift has created distinct experiences, and the gap between those experiences continues to widen. Adaptation means facing the current facts and making choices that align with them rather than holding on to expectations that no longer fit. Women who make progress focus on building genuine self sufficiency and approaching interactions with a sense of shared responsibility. Men who are content in their independence may choose to engage again if the dynamic feels equitable, but they have learned to guard their peace carefully. Society benefits when policies and messages promote fairness and mutual value instead of imbalance. The younger generation is already demonstrating early signs of this adaptation by setting clear boundaries and focusing on personal growth before commitments. This process is unfolding gradually, but the pockets of success are expanding as more people see the benefits. The ones who adapt effectively will navigate the future with greater stability, while those who resist will continue to feel the effects until they shift. The coming years will likely see the trends deepen as men solidify their independent lifestyles and women continue to adjust to the absence of the old support structures. Birth rates may remain low as fewer individuals choose to start families under the current conditions, and that will have broad implications for everything from economic growth to social services. Social media will keep providing a real time record of the changes, both positive and challenging, and it will influence how the next wave of young adults approaches relationships. Legal systems may see incremental reforms, but in the meantime, men will continue to make decisions based on the existing framework. The cultural conversation will evolve, with voices calling for balance and others defending the status quo, but lived experiences will keep grounding the discussion in reality. The overall direction is toward greater self reliance across the board, and the outcomes will reflect how well people and institutions respond to that direction. The sobering truth is that the shift is already reshaping society in fundamental ways, and the full effects will unfold over the next decade and beyond. Men continue to refine their daily practices as they discover what works best for their individual goals. And that refinement brings a level of satisfaction that feels earned. They allocate time and resources toward areas that yield long term returns, whether those areas are career related or personal development or simple enjoyment. The freedom to choose without negotiation allows them to experiment and adjust in ways that were not possible before. And the results show in their confidence and their contentment. Social circles shrink to the essential people who add real value, and those relationships grow stronger because they are based on choice rather than obligation. Financial strategies focus on building security that cannot be easily disrupted, and that security opens doors to opportunities that once seemed out of reach. This lifestyle is sustainable because it is built on self knowledge and discipline rather than external validation, and it attracts others who recognize the difference. The bar serves as a gathering point where these approaches get shared and the collective knowledge base grows with each conversation. The influence on children extends into their teenage years and early adulthood as they apply the lessons they observed during their formative time. Boys who saw limited stable male presence develop a strong sense of self reliance, and they approach potential partnerships with careful consideration of the risk involved. Girls who witness the practical challenges begin to prioritize skills and networks that provide real security rather than relying on narratives that promise support without substance. Educational systems adapt to the changing family compositions by offering additional resources, but the core need for balanced parental involvement remains, and the results vary based on how well that need is met. Communities feel the effects through smaller cohorts and different demands on services, and they adjust accordingly over time. The lower birth rates create a demographic reality that influences everything from labor markets to cultural norms, and the next generation will inherit both the challenges and the opportunities that come with it. This is the slow moving transformation that started with individual decisions, and it is now visible at every level of society. Social media remains a powerful force in shaping perceptions because it delivers unfiltered accounts from people living through the shift every day. Women documenting their experiences with financial pressure and loneliness find their posts resonating with others in similar situations, and the visibility keeps the topic alive. Men encountering these accounts see reflections of their own past interactions, and it confirms the wisdom of their current path. The public nature of the discussions allows for direct feedback that cuts through polite pretense, and the honesty accelerates awareness on both sides. Platforms reward content that sparks genuine engagement, so the most straightforward stories rise to prominence and they influence how people think about their own choices. The offline equivalent happens in casual settings like this bar, where the same issues get explored without digital intermediaries, and the conclusions often align with what is seen online. This combination of digital and in person conversation is making the reality impossible to avoid, and it is pushing more individuals to make conscious decisions about how they want to live. Legal factors continue to guide many men's actions because the existing structure has not yet adjusted to the voluntary nature of participation. Court decisions that assign ongoing responsibilities create a strong incentive to avoid situations that could lead to those outcomes. Custody and support arrangements that appear unbalanced from one perspective discourage involvement, and that discouragement spreads through shared stories and advice. The possibility of serious consequences from unproven claims keeps many cautious about deepening commitments, and that caution becomes a habit. Financial exposure in separation cases feels disproportionate to the actual contributions in some instances, and men respond by limiting their legal exposure entirely. Experts in family law observe the patterns and recommend protective measures, but the most straightforward measure for many is simply to stay outside the system. This legal environment added significant weight to the decision to walk away, and it continues to reinforce that choice for new generations. The result is a large group of men who prioritize self protection when considering any form of long term involvement. The emotional load women experience shows up in recurring patterns that influence their health decisions and their general perspective as time progresses. The responsibility of carrying all aspects of life without previous backup leads to a sustained level of stress that affects sleep and energy and overall well being. Moments of introspection bring forward questions about earlier paths, but the dominant cultural messages make it difficult to pursue those questions openly. Friendships and family ties become more central as sources of support, but they have limits when the needs are practical and ongoing. Some women start exploring alternative ways of connecting by modifying their expectations or initiating contact differently. But the process of rebuilding mutual trust is gradual and requires consistency. Men who have stepped back often describe a clearer mental state because they are no longer attempting to manage dynamics that were outside their control, and that clarity translates into better decision making across the board. The separation of experiences between the groups underscores how the shift has created parallel realities, and the distance between those realities shows no immediate signs of narrowing. Adaptation in practice involves aligning actions with the current facts rather than holding out for a return to previous conditions. Women making meaningful progress invest in skills that create genuine independence, and they approach potential relationships with an emphasis on reciprocity. Men content with their independence remain open to new connections only when the terms feel balanced, and they have become skilled at recognizing when that balance is absent. Society as a whole moves forward when institutions and messages encourage fairness and shared value instead of one sided expectations. The emerging generation is already showing early adaptation by establishing boundaries and focusing on self development before entering commitments. This adaptation is occurring unevenly, but the successful examples are multiplying and influencing others. The individuals who master it will face the future with more resilience, while those who delay will continue to experience the friction until they adjust. The trajectory for the remainder of the decade and into the next suggests that the separation will become more defined as lifestyles solidify on both sides. Men will deepen their commitment to self directed lives, and the advantages will continue to accumulate. Women will work through the challenges of reduced external support, and some will find new forms of stability while others search for solutions. Demographic trends will reflect lower family formation rates, and the resulting shifts will require adjustments in planning at every level. Social media will persist as a real time chronicle of the changes, providing both validation and warning depending on the perspective. Legal frameworks may evolve slowly, but men will continue to base their choices on the present reality until those frameworks catch up. The cultural dialogue will include calls for reconnection alongside defenses of the current path, but personal experiences will remain the ultimate guide. The sobering reality is that this transformation is already well underway, and its full shape will become clearer with each passing year. Men refine their approaches as they gain more experience with their independent lifestyles, and the refinements bring increasing levels of satisfaction. They structure their time around activities that align with their values, and they protect that structure because it delivers consistent results. Physical training remains a priority because it supports mental sharpness and physical capability in all other areas. Learning and skill development keep them engaged with the world on their terms, and the progress they make reinforces their sense of control. Social interactions are chosen carefully, and they strengthen bonds that are based on genuine compatibility rather than necessity. Financial planning focuses on long term security that cannot be easily compromised, and that security expands their options over time. This way of living feels natural after the initial adjustment, and it draws in others who see the tangible benefits. The bar continues to serve as a space where these strategies are exchanged, and the shared insights help everyone involved move forward with greater clarity. The lasting effects on children become more apparent as they reach milestones that require the foundation they received during their early years. Boys who experienced limited, consistent male guidance develop strong internal compasses, and they navigate their own relationships with a focus on self respect and practicality. Girls who saw the practical difficulties firsthand begin to value security that comes from personal preparation and balanced partnerships rather than external promises. Educational and community systems continue to adapt to the changing family landscape by offering targeted support, but the fundamental need for stable two parent involvement remains evident in the outcomes. The smaller cohorts entering society create both challenges and opportunities in resource allocation and cultural development, and the next generation will shape those areas according to the lessons they internalized. This demographic evolution is a direct result of the choices made at the individual level, and it is now influencing systems on a larger scale. Social media functions as an ongoing record and amplifier of the shift by presenting unvarnished accounts from people living the reality daily. Women sharing their challenges with independence and financial management find common ground with others in similar positions, and the visibility keeps the discussion active. Men viewing these accounts recognize familiar elements from their own histories, and it solidifies their commitment to their current path. The interactive nature of the platforms allows for immediate feedback that reveals patterns and truths that might otherwise stay hidden. Content that sparks honest engagement rises in visibility, and it influences how individuals assess their own situations. The in person version of these exchanges happens in relaxed settings like this bar, where the same topics are explored without the pressure of public performance, and the conclusions frequently mirror what appears online. This blend of digital and direct conversation is making the new normal impossible to overlook, and it is encouraging more people to form their own informed opinions. Legal elements remain a key consideration in many men's decision making because the current setup has not yet reflected the voluntary aspect of involvement. Court practices that result in uneven distributions of responsibility create a powerful reason to avoid entering those arrangements. Custody and financial obligations that appear disproportionate discourage participation, and that discouragement becomes part of the shared understanding among men. The risk of significant repercussions from claims that lack immediate verification promotes a cautious approach that often leads to distance. Financial exposure in the event of separation feels substantial relative to the contributions in some cases. And men limit that exposure by avoiding the legal structures entirely. Family law practitioners witness the repetition of these patterns, and they provide guidance centered on risk reduction. But the most direct form of risk reduction for many is non participation. This legal context added considerable momentum to the walking away, and it continues to support that choice for those coming of age now. The outcome is a substantial population of men who place self protection at the forefront when contemplating any form of binding commitment. The emotional demands placed on women reveal themselves in ongoing patterns that shape their health choices and their broader view of life as the situation persists. The requirement to manage all facets of existence without the former assistance leads to a steady accumulation of stress that influences rest and vitality and general perspective. Periods of self examination surface doubts about previous directions, but prevailing cultural signals make open exploration of those doubts challenging, so they linger without resolution. Personal relationships gain heightened importance as sources of assistance, but they reach their limits when the requirements are concrete and sustained. Some women experiment with revised methods of interaction by altering their standards or extending overtures in new ways, but the rebuilding of reciprocal trust is a measured process that demands steady input. Men who have withdrawn frequently report a more balanced mental condition because they are no longer attempting to oversee dynamics beyond their influence, and that balance improves their judgment in all areas. The divergence of experiences between the groups illustrates how the transition has established separate trajectories, and the space between those trajectories shows little sign of immediate reduction. Adaptation in action means matching behavior to present circumstances instead of anticipating a reversal to earlier conditions. Women achieving noticeable advancement concentrate on developing authentic self reliance, and they enter potential partnerships with an emphasis on balanced contribution. Men satisfied with their autonomy stay receptive to fresh connections only when the arrangement feels equitable, and they have grown adept at identifying when that equity is missing. Society advances when structures and communications foster fairness and joint worth instead of lopsided demands. The rising generation is already displaying preliminary adaptation by creating firm limits and concentrating on individual advancement prior to obligations. This adaptation is taking place at varying speeds, but the effective instances are increasing and affecting others. The people who master it will confront the future with enhanced resilience, while those who postpone will keep encountering the resistance until they modify their approach. The path forward through the decade and into the following one indicates that the division will become more pronounced as lifestyles become more established on each side. Men will intensify their dedication to self guided living, and the benefits will keep building. Women will process the difficulties of diminished outside assistance, and some will discover alternative forms of steadiness while others seek resolutions. Demographic patterns will mirror reduced family creation, and the resulting adjustments will necessitate planning revisions at all levels. Social media will endure as a live account of the developments, offering both affirmation and caution according to viewpoint. Legal structures may progress gradually, but men will persist in basing their decisions on the existing conditions until those structures align. The cultural exchange will feature appeals for reconnection together with support for the present course, but individual encounters will stay the definitive reference. The sobering fact is that this evolution is already firmly established, and its complete form will emerge more distinctly with each successive year. Men keep honing their methods as they accumulate more insight into their autonomous ways of living, and the honing yields growing fulfillment. They organize their schedules around pursuits that match their principles, and they safeguard that organization because it produces reliable outcomes. Physical conditioning stays central since it bolsters mental acuity and physical competence across all domains. Acquisition of knowledge and abilities maintains their connection to the world on their terms, and the advancement they achieve strengthens their feeling of mastery. Interpersonal engagements are selected thoughtfully, and they fortify ties grounded in true compatibility rather than requirement. Monetary strategies emphasize enduring protection that resists easy disruption, and that protection broadens their possibilities as time advances. This manner of existence feels instinctive after the early transition, and it pulls in others who observe the concrete gains. The bar remains a venue where these tactics are traded, and the mutual understanding assists all participants in progressing with increased lucidity. The enduring influence on children grows clearer as they attain stages that depend on the base they acquired in their initial periods. Boys who encountered restricted, steady male direction cultivate robust inner guides, and they steer their personal associations with attention to self regard and pragmatism. Girls who observed the tangible hurdles commenced to prize protection that arises from individual readiness, and even handed alliances rather than outside assurances. Learning and neighborhood systems persist in conforming to the altering family terrain by supplying focused aid, but the essential requirement for steady dual parent participation stays apparent in the consequences. The reduced groups entering society generate both difficulties and prospects in resource distribution and cultural formation. And the subsequent generation will mold those domains in line with the teachings they absorbed. This demographic progression is a straight outcome of the selections made at the personal level, and it is presently affecting structures on a wider measure. Social media operates as a perpetual log and enhancer of the transition by offering unadorned reports from individuals experiencing the reality each day. Women recounting their difficulties with self direction and monetary oversight discover shared territory with others in comparable positions, and the prominence sustains the dialogue. Men examining these reports identify recognizable components from their own histories, and it cements their dedication to their existing course. The interactive character of the platforms permits prompt response that uncovers designs and realities that could otherwise remain concealed. Material that ignites sincere involvement ascends in noticeability, and it sways how persons evaluate their own conditions. The face to face counterpart of these interchanges occurs in unceremonious locations like this bar, where the identical subjects are examined without the strain of public display. And the deductions regularly parallel what surfaces online. This fusion of electronic and immediate dialogue is rendering the fresh standard impossible to disregard, and it is motivating more persons to shape their personal knowledgeable views. Legal aspects persist as a principal consideration in numerous men's judgment because the present arrangement has not yet mirrored the elective feature of participation. Court procedures that produce irregular allocations of accountability generate a potent incentive to evade those setups. Custody and monetary duties that seem mismatched discourage engagement, and that deterrence becomes portion of the mutual comprehension among men. The hazard of considerable backlash from assertions lacking instant confirmation encourages a wary method that frequently results in separation. Monetary vulnerability in the instance of parting feels considerable compared to the inputs in certain instances, and men can find that vulnerability by evading the legal constructions completely. Family law experts witness the recurrence of these designs, and they supply direction centered on hazard decrease. But the most straightforward type of hazard decrease for numerous is non engagement. This legal setting contributed considerable drive to the walking away, and it persists in backing that selection for those reaching maturity presently. The consequence is a considerable population of men who position self protection at the forefront when pondering any type of binding pledge. The emotional requirements placed on women disclose themselves in continuing designs that form their health selections and their wider outlook on existence as the condition endures. The obligation to oversee all dimensions of being without the prior help leads to a steady buildup of tension that affects slumber and vigor and general viewpoint. Intervals of self study surface uncertainties about prior roots, but prevailing cultural indicators render open investigation of those uncertainties challenging, so they linger without settlement. Private associations attain elevated significance as origins of help, but they attain their boundaries when the necessities are tangible and prolonged. Some women test with updated techniques of exchange by changing their criteria or extending proposals in fresh manners. But the reconstruction of shared confidence is a calculated procedure that calls for steady contribution. Men who have pulled back regularly report a more equilibrated mental state because they are no longer attempting to supervise dynamics beyond their command, and that equilibration improves their discernment in all domains. The divergence of encounters between the groups demonstrates how the transition has founded separate courses, and the space between those courses exhibits little indication of immediate contraction. Adaptation in operation signifies matching conduct to existing situations instead of expecting a reversion to earlier states. Women attaining visible headway concentrate on cultivating genuine self dependence, and they approach potential alliances with an accent on balanced input. Men pleased with their independence stay accessible to novel connections only when the setup feels fair, and they have become proficient at spotting when that fairness is absent. Society progresses when frameworks and communications advance equity and combined merit instead of lopsided requirements. The ascending generation is already exhibiting initial adaptation by forming solid boundaries and focusing on personal advancement prior to pledges. This adaptation is transpiring at differing velocities, but the productive cases are multiplying and impacting others. The persons who master it will meet the future with improved toughness, while those who defer will persist in meeting the resistance until they alter their method. The route onward through the decade and into the subsequent one proposes that the division will turn more distinct as ways of living grow more fixed on each side. Men will heighten their devotion to self steered existence, and the gains will persist in accumulating. Women will handle the complications of lessened exterior help, and some will uncover substitute kinds of steadiness while others pursue answers. Demographic designs will echo decreased family establishment, and the resulting modifications will demand planning revisions at all strata. Social media will last as a live chronicle of the progression, supplying both confirmation and alert according to angle. Legal constructions may advance bit by bit, but men will endure in grounding their judgments on the prevailing conditions until those constructions correspond. The cultural interchange will include entreaties for reconnection alongside backing for the existing path, but individual meetings will stay the conclusive standard. The sobering actuality is that this progression is already firmly fixed, and its total configuration will surface more plainly with each following year. So here we are, wrapping up this long, honest discussion about the hard truth that has been unfolding right in front of everyone for years now. And if you have stuck with it all the way through, you can see exactly how the choices from the past have created the situation we are living in today, where men have quietly walked away from the whole game after being told they were optional, dangerous, or outright toxic, and they have found a real lasting peace in keeping their time, their money, and their energy focused on building something solid for themselves instead of pouring it into arrangements that left them drained and disrespected, while women who once counted on that support as a given are now facing the full weight of high living costs, empty support networks, and a dating scene that has gone completely silent in many places. This is not some temporary phase or a backlash. It is the straightforward consequence of decades of pushing men out of the picture and expecting the state or society to pick up the slack. And now that the state is broke and the men are gone, the reality is hitting harder than anyone wanted to admit, with single mothers scraping by, young women living in cars, and a whole generation realizing that the independence they were sold came with a price tag they never fully calculated. The sobering part is that the shift is not going away. It is only getting more defined as economic pressures mount, and more men see the wisdom in protecting their own survival and peace rather than stepping back into the old one sided dynamic that never delivered mutual respect or real balance, and that leaves women confronting a world where the free meals, the emotional support, and the financial buffer simply are not there anymore, forcing a kind of reckoning that feels raw and unavoidable for everyone involved. Shout out to the 2 hour gang. What did you think about everything we discussed here today? Do you agree with the way this situation has played out and the reasons men have chosen to walk away? Or do you see parts of it differently based on your own experiences or what you are seeing around you? Drop a comment below and share your honest thoughts, because these kinds of conversations only get stronger and clearer when real people weigh in with what is happening in their own lives, their circles, and their daily reality. And it helps cut through the noise to figure out what comes next in this new landscape that we are all navigating together. Like the video if you like it. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you like the video, share the video. And just remember that all roads lead to MWA, men walking away. And cheers.
Nothing says you care like crypto. Nothing can compare. Nothing says you care like crypto. Oh, nothing can compare to crypto.